Riley Davis's lunch buddy, Jamie Shaw, came out with an incredible article for On3 where he went behind the scenes at North Carolina basketball and interviewed Hubert Davis. We have a couple different videos up on the channel this morning, all covering some takeaways from Jamie Shaw's work. So make sure you go subscribe to On3, follow Jamie Shaw, support all of the awesome things that he is doing when he's not ordering a chicken Caesar salad with Riley Davis. Now, this is a question Jamie posed to North Carolina head coach Hubert Davis. Quote, 10 new players isn't going to be the goal every year, but it's what you have this year. How important for you is roster continuity, year over year retention? Hubert's answer, quote, that's huge. I think the number one thing that's really important, roster retention. You know, our team this year has 10 guys that are eligible to come back. Now, obviously, I want them to go to the NBA, have great years. But if that's not the option that they want, I want them to come back here. So that's really important for us too. NBA and retention. Those are the two. End quote. You're a North Carolina basketball fan. I can't wait to get your thoughts on this. Before I throw it to you, I would just simply like to point out that if roster retention is the most important thing for North Carolina, I would point out that Cade Tyson, Ian Jackson, Jalen Washington, Elliot Cadeau, and Van Allen Lubin are all playing basketball again, not in North Carolina uniforms this season.
Mhm.
Your thoughts, Riley?
Yeah, this is where I gave Hubert his due in the first video we did, where he was talking about personalities and said, I'm a Hubert whisperer. I feel like I can pick up some things. In my studies and observing him over the past 4 years, the man loves his hyperbole. That is like almost his default, where he's saying Derek Dixon and Isaiah Dennis will have their names in the rafters. He said the same thing about DeMarco Dunn and Dontrez Styles. He said this. He said as much to James Brown, which at some point it's like, all right, man, chill on the rafters. How about we get like good rotation player before we go to rafters? But to me, reading that number one importance thing, it's like that's the second thing this offseason he has said is the number one most important thing for UNC basketball. Greg, there was a quote a couple weeks ago where I think it was his first media availability of the offseason where a reporter asked him about the size that they added, and he mentioned rebounding being the most important thing. So first rebounding was the most important thing for UNC basketball. Now retention is. You got to pick one or the other. Hopefully we'll get a couple more number one important things before the season starts. We'll have some opportunities for that. But yeah, I think retention is important, but it's also fascinating when you look at this tenure he's had. The teams where he retained the most like underachieved. 2022, 2023, brought back everybody but Brady Manick, and they missed the tournament. Last year, brought back, I guess they lost some starters with Armando, Cormac, Harrison, but they brought back the starting backcourt, and they brought back their best bench piece in Seth Trimble, and brought back a guy who was in the top eight in Jalen Withers, and Armando's back up big with Jalen Washington. Like, if you look at his moves last year, with them not adding any other foreman other than technically Cade Tyson, they didn't really pursue anybody. It was like they went after a Duthiero, and I think that was more of a connection at the time because TJ Beisner was doing a lot with NIL program who had come from John Calipari's staff to UNC. And I think there was a connection there with Thiero. But when they missed on Thiero, they didn't even look at any foremen. They looked at a bunch of bigs, but no foremen. It was like, okay, there's some sort of priority here with Jalen Withers, and even being so selective with which bigs they did, which bigs they initially pursued. It was like, okay, they want to give Jalen Washington a role, and it came back to bite them to where I think roster retention is good when you have adequate knowledge of what you have on your roster. And I think that's to me where I'm like, I wouldn't say this I was Hubert, just because when you look at the two seasons, 22, 23 when they miss it, last year when they're their last four in, the guys who they expected to take leaps did not. And to be frank, most of them weren't even really close to taking those leaps. And so that's where I'm like, you can lean into having to turn over the roster, because after last year, just speak openly about it. We know it needed to be a hard reset.
Yeah, okay. So on retention, retention is important. I think we make it one of the five pillars of the importance of the state of the program exercise we do.
Mhm.
Like I don't how much talent is coming in and out, even if you crush the portal, even if you crush freshman recruiting, whatever, retention matters. I think the best teams every year at least retain a couple key pieces. So I don't want to dispute that if he's saying retention is really important, I believe him. I think
Mhm.
this year's roster was built with that in mind. So I can see that. And if we go guy by guy through this, I think most of them should be back in North Carolina uniforms. It just falls a little on deaf ears for me because, like, I'm a big intermittent fasting guy. Like, I've been preaching that for years on this program. I'm certainly not
Mhm.
the most in shape human, but I've had good bouts of weight loss through the years because I stick to intermittent fasting. In fact, I'm currently working on that right now again. If I came out and was just like, yeah, the most important meal of the day is breakfast, everyone would roll their eyes. Like, Greg, you don't eat until like 12 p.m. every day. Like, my meal
Mhm.
starts at 12:30. That's not breakfast. It is important. You didn't do it. Like, that's not what you did. And it's not like all these guys went pro. Cade Tyson, Ian Jackson, Jalen Washington, Elliot Cadeau, and Van Allen Lubin all could be back. I think last year the plan would have been for most of those to be back. It went so poorly that no one wants to be back. Whether
Mhm.
it's like Hubert wanted a fresh start as much as these guys wanted a fresh start.
Mhm.
So just because it's the plan to have a bunch of guys that could come back, could have been that last year too, and you failed miserably. So coming on record and saying retention is the key, you've lost the key. If that's what you're saying you're trying to build your program on, God, don't say that out loud, dude. You're
Yeah.
already on the hot seat. And you're talking retention when you just lost 10 guys. Like, it's the wrong message from the wrong guy at the wrong time. Maybe a year from now we'll feel differently about it because if we go up and down this roster, Kai and Evans, unless he's bad, he's back. I would assume
Mhm.
Luka Bogovats is back for year two unless he's too good. Caleb Wilson won't be back. Vasar, Powell, Stevenson, all guys that should be back. Dennis and Dixon will be back. Like, it makes sense going forward, but it's the wrong time for Hubert to be preaching that. Dion, how's your job going?
Beginning of the school year, everything's like a little up and down. One of the biggest issues we've had is we can't find any uniforms for our girls' sports teams.
Mm, that's a difficult thing to find a solution for. I know damn well all about that because I got a daughter that just turned 2. She's into sports and she's already outgrowing every little piece of sports apparel she had. Thankfully, I know Clara Kate Creations. Clara Kate Creations was started by a former high school teacher who quit because it wasn't cost effective to send new twins and a 2-year-old to daycare. She found it easier to make girls' sports apparel than finding it to buy. And I am so thankful that she exists because if we have an old shirt of Murph's that she's outgrown, we can send it in and she takes that piece of apparel that means something and upcycles it into an outfit that Murphy can now wear as she grows up. She makes great stuff. It's honestly kind of like your fullback's wife, Kyle Juszczyk. Is that how you say it? She does that. But honestly, I think Clara Kate's coming for Mrs. Juszczyk's job.
I love that. I'm a big Juice guy, love his wife, love Claire Kate even more than both of them, though.
You can send in your own custom ideas and she will come up with a design. She's just the best. Look up Clara Kate Creations on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and more.
It's that what you're saying, Greg, goes back to something that I think has been a critique of Hubert's throughout his tenure is his messaging problem. Like he communicates one thing that just seems like our eyes tell us differently watching it on the court. And that was something I think inside Carolina were the first to point this out his first year where if you remember at the time, Carolina, they got blitzed by Purdue and Tennessee at the Mohegan Sun. They got ran off the court against Kentucky in the CBS Sports Classic. And even going into ACC play, there were so many questions around that roster that, eventually it gelled and they made the national title game and it was awesome. But throughout that whole period, it was like the answers that you wanted from Hubert, people weren't getting. It was a lot of dodging the questions or the concerns. At the time, I thought he's a first year head coach, he's figuring it out, but I didn't tried not to read too much into it. But I think as the years have gone on, there were, it reminds me of I already mentioned the 22-23 season when they were on the bubble and on the wrong side of the bubble for most of it. Going into the ACC tournament, if you remember, there was that question about what do you make of needing to win this tournament to get into the big dance? And he said, I don't buy into that narrative, which is like, it doesn't matter whether or not you buy into it. Like that, this is the state of where the team is at. You got to get the
Yeah.
auto bid to make it to the tournament. And sometimes it's like, it just seems, I don't know. I know some Carolina fans who love Hubert come at me for this and say I'm too critical or whatever. But I feel like when he says some of this stuff in these press conferences, it makes it feel like he's not being authentic, which to me, as a fan, is like, dude, you don't get the fan base. You're not telling us what we need to hear. And I think it's like, you're one of us. You're a Tar Heel. We want you to succeed. Like, just it's okay to admit and be truthful. Like, yeah, last year's roster didn't work out, and it's actually going forward. We want retention to be a high priority, but sometimes you got to turn it over. Like
Yeah.
we thought it was needed, and maybe speaking a little more honestly and showing the fan base you understand them better could lead to either better. Yeah, I think that would help with job security. But yeah, it's a theme we've seen over the past few years that I don't think is going to change. I think he's always going to keep it really buttoned up and coach speaky like publicly. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from, where it's like this is it's not really resonating that like the way maybe you hope it will.
Or worse, because I do think Hubert is an incredibly authentic person. I've never really watched a Hubert Davis clip anywhere or listened to him where I feel like he's putting on a facade of any sort.
Mhm.
But this can be worse. Again, I know this from experience. I feel like I went through this entire trauma a couple of years before you did. My team didn't get to a national championship, but they made an Elite Eight. They were a top three team in the sport. I watched an incompetent head coach have success. And then I watched the wheels fall off gradually over 4 years, even though we didn't want it to. One of the staples of it was not the lack of authenticity from the coach. It was that he was being authentic and didn't have a pulse on what was going on. And I think that is how I interpret this. Like, retention's the key to my program. Dude, we are 2 months removed from a kid in Drake Powell going pro and at the combine telling everyone that would listen, yeah, I had to leave because Hubert Davis didn't put me in the spots that I needed to be in. Like, that's how you could have retained him if your coach could be on a good relationship with him. Like, and I'm not saying Drake didn't want to go to the NBA. There's also a world he was just better last year and he goes anyway. But like, it's pretty clear that if Drake Powell thought that Hubert would put him in any position to succeed, he would have been open to not leaving at the time he left. And
Mhm.
for that to be the guy that's like retention, 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 dude, you suck at retention. So on that note, I went through all these guys. I think all of them could be back. Let's just read those names again. Kyan Evans, Bogovats, Vasar Powell, Stevenson, Dennis, Dixon. I think that's 7 or 8 different guys. You could add Jaden Young to it. Does Hayden High, James Brown? Sure. Even who's the 7-footer, Matt Lakovich, the high point
Yeah,
kid.
Matt
So
Lakovich.
I guess that's like 12 guys. How many of them are back next year?
It's a great question. If Bogovac gets 2 years of eligibility, I think he's back. Vasar, I think in his ideal world, and probably for Carolina fans, you want him going to the NBA. I think Vicini had him as like a top 35 pick right now. He's usually in that 30 to 40 range on mock drafts. So let's say Vasar's gone. Stevenson, I think ideally you get him back, and that you if he gets more and more comfortable in his role. Powell, you want back. Kyan, you want back. Dixon to me is the one guy who I'm like, I need Derek. I need 4 years of Derek Dixon. Give me
Yeah.
3 to 4 years of Derek Dixon. He's it might sound crazy, but he's probably the one I'm prioritizing the most to get back.
Wow. No, it doesn't sound crazy. I believe in Dixon as well.
Just
Yeah.
because guards with that size and that shooting and ball handling ability who have a track record and a pedigree of winning everywhere they've been, like you want to hold on to those guys, even if he's a little underwhelming as a freshman.
Yeah.
Um,
I would think
so
you want both the freshman guards back. Like, you want this year to at least be a trajectory for both where it makes sense for all parties to be
yeah,
back. Yeah.
I would love to have Isaiah Dennis back. He's the one that, like, just when you look at, I don't know where his minutes come from this year, and that's where it's like, okay, you just have to acknowledge the way college basketball works that he would be a transfer risk. If that relationship sours or something, or if he doesn't see a clear path to minutes next year. But yeah, if I had to say like right now, the ones who I feel the best will be in Carolina blue next year would be like Derek Dixon, Jonathan Powell, Jaron Stevenson, probably Kyan Evans, unless it's just apparent that he like can't cut it at this level.
But like, at minimum, it's safe to say the expectation is at least what, like 60% of these guys are back. And if
Yeah, I think
if
that's fair.
not, something went woefully wrong.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Which to that point, like credit to Hubert, because if you're building this roster in like a 2 year plan, I like year two of it a lot if you can actually deliver on it. But now the pressure's on. If you're going to verbalize it this way, the pressure's on to actually deliver that. And final question for me, I asked how many guys will be back. I agree with your answer. How many of those guys in that group that I just mentioned will be playing for Will Wade next year?
I mean, he can
Jaron
have our.
Stevenson seems like a prime Will Wade candidate.
I don't want to lose Jaron to Will Wade. That would stink.
Like
His
Like
Will
I,
Wade.
Jaron Stevenson screams, "I'm the third big. I stink." The North Carolina fan base decides they hate me, and I play 14 minutes a game. And then in July, Will Wade is like, "He just needs 28 minutes a game."
Okay, that when you put it that way, yes, that makes a lot of sense. I would say like whoever is the worst big who plays well against Virginia Tech, sure, have at it, Will Wade. You can
If I
have.
gave you like plus 300, 3-1 odds that there will be any player on this year's Carolina team that's playing for NC State next year, would you take it?
Yes. Yeah.